Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a little fun episode for you guys where I just want to talk about really well wearing 42 millimeter divers. Now, with a lot of trends for sizes going back down to 40, 38, 39, for sports watches, I thought it would be important because I have covered a lot of watches for smaller wrists. I've covered some really large divers as well. I think 42 millimeters is also considered a real sweet spot for many. And that's the reason why they keep making watches around that size. As much as people want to, ask for 40 and slightly below, 42 is a really popular size for a reason because it wears really well for most wrists. And, a diver watch shouldn't necessarily be, this really petite thing. It's a big tool, instrument type watch. So it should have some presence on the wrist. So for my pick for the top three, best wearing 42 millimeter dive watches, you have your Seiko Mini Turtle, your Christopher Ward Trident Mk3, and your Raven Solitude. So I think these are really great examples of 42 millimeter watches that wear much nicer than you would expect. And I think that they also wear really well for smaller wrists as well. A lot of it does have to do with the contouring of the cases, as well as I think even their play on, although if you look at these right now, they all look like different sizes. That's really attributing to their play on the actual formula of the way that these are all laid out as far as the kind of dial to bezel ratio, and then to the body after that. As you can see, when you look at the Seiko, smaller dial, smaller bezel, wider portion of body around it, versus the Christopher Ward, which is really pushed out to the edges. It has a very large dial with a thinner bezel ratio around the outside, everything pushing over, even a little bit of an overhang, I'd say, probably outside of the case. And then the Raven being more closely modeled towards something like the Seiko as far as the ratio, but it even makes it appear even smaller because it has the metal bezel insert versus your typical color insert. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get these in hand and take a closer look. Okay guys, so let's go ahead and take a look at what makes these wear so well. Here, one of the main things is look how short that lug to lug distance is. I mean, this thing, it's just it's like a can. I mean, look at that. It's lug to lug is shorter than many watches are wide, if you look at that. So that's going to wear amazing. And then plus you have the female end link, so that's going to wear amazing pretty much on any wrist. And then you look at the contours here, and then they're high polished, so visually they're going to disappear. And then because of that contour, even on the wrist, it's going to disappear. It's going to be quite comfortable. And really nice and great proportions, right? You look at that proportionally, then let's say you look at this. It's very similar proportions on that. Look at that, guys, the way that hangs and the way that looks. Again, you're going to have these watches doing tricks. You see, again, that beautiful contour. Then here you're adding that beautiful bevel as well. So you're getting a nice visual pop, as well as something that really just shows the level of quality and detail that goes into a timepiece like this. And then, just great proportions generally overall when it comes to, let's say, the bracelet dimensions, and then the taper looks really, really great. And that's just, look at that. They're putting in work to make this thing wear really, really well, wear a lot more like a 40 in this case. And then you have, of course, the highly touted Mk3 Trident from Christopher Ward. This thing is killer. I've done tons of reviews on them. I actually own quite a few variations of the Trident C60, and then out of that, I mean, even more that are Mk3s. I have a blue and I have a black dial Trident Mk3, both in 42, because look at the tricks that they employ to make this thing just thin out on the wrist. Look at those. Look at that nice soft undercut there, high polished. Then you got your very nice high polished bevel that just squeezes everything out, thins it out. It's like a model sucking in their cheeks, right? And it's just vacuum tight. It's just sealed up nice. Makes the watch feel more flat, making it feel more thin. And then the proportions, you have actually wider lugs here with quite a dramatic taper. Look at that. Tapering from 22 millimeters at the lug down to 18 down at the clasp. So really nice, and it just helps this watch wear just really nice on the wrist, but tons of presence, of course, because it just, look at that dial. It still has a big empty dial when you think about it, although it does have that little flag ghosted logo there. It's just, it plays with space in such an interesting way. It makes you feel like you're getting a lot more watch for what it actually feels like on your wrist. So it almost plays with you, running it back and forth with feelings of it being a little bit large, but also smaller than it actually is. So yeah, these are just nice ones. And you know what, instead of like cutting the camera and getting them on wrist, because I only have 2 wrists, I'll just do it on camera for you guys, and I'll just kind of go through them all. So first we'll start with your classic Seiko, and of course this is the Mini Turtle, which is a modern interpretation. And look at the way that thing wears on my 7 1/4 inch wrist really well. You can see those contours do just help this thing somehow disappear on the wrist, and even up close, that really short lug to lug help keep it very compact. Even when you're up close, and a wristy should make it seem like really oversized, it really helps it almost be a bit undersized from what you would imagine, especially from a Seiko diver, because typically Seiko divers are quite large, and 43s, 44s, 46s, 47s, you get into the tunas. So they find ways to be really creative in sculpting and contouring their timepieces to where they just are still super comfortable. And although they have quite a bit of wrist presence, everything I think is really, really well balanced. So really nice from that standpoint. Okay, next we'll get some wrist love for this popular guy here. Wow, super premium feeling. Of course, these are all in different price points, guys. This was more about kind of the size variation. Maybe somebody's searching, as much as people search for 39 millimeter diver or 40 millimeter diver. There's probably a good amount of people that want to zero in on that 42 millimeter size. There's people that love the Submariner from Rolex but wish there was a 42 millimeter variant. So for those of you, check out this video, because there's some really well-wearing 42s. Look at the way the light plays, and then just the way those contours affect the way that case looks. It just looks so much thinner and flatter and sleeker. It just shrinks the watch down somehow. And then those wider lugs with the taper just give it just a nice graceful flow. And of course, this is the white dial, so it's going to seem like it already has a big dial, but the big empty dial makes it feel like there's just so much dial there. With not that much presence anywhere else, because you have just the light playing and dancing over it, kind of blending everything into your wrist. So really nice from that standpoint. Oops, I got it stuck in the... Oh, excuse me. And that glove there. We'll close as far as wristies with this guy here. Man, this Raven. Oh, this thing is so epic. Actually based on a really small actual female diver that I want to say was like 36 millimeters back in the day. And they've plus sized it up into a really, really great scale. And I think the proportions play extremely, extremely well. And of course, because it was a very obscure reference that it took inspiration from, you can't even, most people would never even know that it had any type of homage roots. Which I think it definitely did enough with the design itself to really be considered, you know, more of an original piece. Same thing with the Christopher Ward, right? You know, it really started out as kind of a mishmash of a lot of other references. And I think here, yeah, you see a couple touches here and there, inspirations from other references, but nothing that it's directly, you know, really paying homage to, because of the extra care taken in the design of the bracelet and the dial, you know, and the bezel insert options and the way the bezel slopes just so and has that beautiful coin finish, you know, and the slightly different take on the crown guards, but really, really handsome. As you guys can see, this one wears really great, and definitely has such a Seiko vibe. Of course, it's also Seiko powered, has Seiko movement, but this one is just so much fun. I actually find myself wearing it probably a lot more than I thought I would. This blue tone goes really well with jeans, and then the steel and the blue, it's just such a great combination. And then the light blue with the steel is so different, and just a lot of fun. So I find myself wearing it a lot. So let's actually move into some low light and Lume shots, and then we'll wrap this thing up for closing thoughts. All right, we'll go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, Lume really great. Of course, on the Raven, this is actually the variation that doesn't have the loomed bezel insert, because this is kind of the traveler bezel insert. But as you can see, the Lume is really great on all these, really. The blue hue is just beautiful. I'm really digging it. Super clean, super clear and crisp and cool. And then you can really see, as far as like the scale goes, I mean, look at that Christopher Ward and the amount of Lume that's out there. Of course, it's not quite as thick, and you know, it's really concentrated when you look at the Seiko, but the nice spread you get, I think, on the Christopher Ward is noteworthy. And you're also getting that fully loomed, you know, index there, so you can actually time everything, you know, with a little bit extra clarity. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into some low light transitions so you guys can get an idea of, one, the fit and finish of these in some harsher lighting conditions there, where you watch the way the light is going to glide over some of the brushing and the polishing. You'll be able to kind of see if there's anything rough there. On these, in this case, these are all really, really finely finished. And then also you're going to be able to kind of see how legible these are in transitional lighting, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field in direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to be, you know, in a vehicle, indoors, whatnot. And you're not going to have really great lighting a lot of the time. So you're going to be able to see kind of the textures and the colors, how they render, as well as the finishing. And look at the way the matte on that mini turtle, as far as that matte black, the way they catch light, very different than the way that ceramic bezel insert in comparison stays quite dark unless there's a direct reflection on there. As you can see, very inky and contrasting. And then, yeah, there's going to be some times when the lighting might wash out, you know, polished indices on a white dial, but for the most part, it stays super legible. So yeah, let me go ahead and get the lights back on here. This was, you know, not meant to be a super full, long, you know, segment. Really one just to highlight the fact that 42mm watches were good, and I think there's a lot of people that kind of get caught up in chasing numbers, and they're like, make it in a 40 and then it'll be my perfect watch, and end up shying away from certain watches. And I think these are three great examples of watches that are 42mm that work extremely well. They wear perfectly. I think if you made the Mini Turtle any smaller, it would look too small. I think if you they do have a 40mm Christopher Ward Mk3 Trident, and I think the 42 wears better. I think that although the scale of 40 is this desirable number, I think the proportions, as far as when you look at the center links on the bracelet, you look at the way the lugs flow, they're better on the 42. This watch was designed to be 42mm, and it was downsized to be in two other sizes, one in 40 and one in 38. So the pure design wise, this watch is meant to be a 42, and I think that's where it looks its best. And it's not to say that they won't redesign something and maybe push some indices closer together or play with some proportions and make a 40 that's a sweet spot. But as far as the Mark III goes in this dial layout, hey, I'm going to have to say that the 42 is the best one, in my eyes anyway. And then when you go to the Raven, yeah, if they made it smaller, I think it would look a little bit too small again, because this thing already wears small. It's really advertised as a 40 sometimes because the bezel itself is a 40 and it has those dial proportions for a 40 millimeter diver, versus a 42, which I think it pulls off really well in the same vein of Seiko. So with all that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Definitely let me know what you guys think down below, if you have any questions as well. You know, and maybe some of those of you that are looking for the 42 millimeter, maybe that is your sweet spot. What do you guys think? So yeah, looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks, guys.